Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Mendez, en compañía de dos distinguidos amigos, Drew Murray y Fernando Treviño. Y Dani controla la máquina digital, Dani Ramos. Tenemos noticias y comentarios, pero sobre todo comentarios hoy porque estos dos individuos tienen opiniones muy fuertes sobre todo. Así que vamos a ver cómo los contradecimos. So we're going to see how we can contradict everything that Drew has to say and let Fernando say whatever he wants to say because it doesn't make any difference, right? Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you were here.
How are you guys?
Good. I'm great. Yeah, I'm happy to contradict you guys on every aspect. And at the end of the day, like normally happens with Mr. Mendez and I win the debate, and he's all upset. He goes running out of here, and then he brings me back. And don't try to talk Spanish in between me because I no hablo español because I don't know. I didn't learn much Spanish in the prep. I don't know who was teaching it, but I did not learn Spanish well.
It's the typical mentality of certain Republicans that they won the election, they didn't lose the election, they won the debate, they didn't lose any debate. You know,
so some Republicans.
It's another dimension, so to speak. We don't understand each other apparently. So it's a different language. Well, we're here in the midst of very controversial things going on in Washington right now. Great concern about the vote, great worries about whether or not to do away with the filibuster. There are strong views on either side of that. The environment, as we have seen catastrophic events this week with the weather, tornadoes that destroyed a large part of the country. We see fires in California, we see floods on the East Coast. Like, obviously, the environment is a big concern. Now, from each of you, what is the main issue as you see coming into 2022? Fernando, what do you think the main issue?
Well, Takayo, you know that I always come back to the root cause of everything, right? And when we are discussing different issues from Republican perspective, from Democratic perspective, every single issue is on the line when redistricting is done the wrong way. And I know that that's not a sexy issue to discuss sometimes, but we have the problems that we're having in Washington, D.C., in Congress, because Republicans have been able to gerrymander maps for a long time, and that's where we're stuck in this process. Obviously, the Freedom to Vote Act is going to be very important to empower communities of color to come out, to vote, to motivate them to be part of the process. The same legislation actually includes a provision that prohibits partisan gerrymandering, so it always comes back to redistricting for me. And right now in Pennsylvania, we're literally in the middle of everything, so happy to chat more about the topic later today.
Drew, what do you see as the main issue coming up?
Well, we have two huge elections coming up next year, two huge primaries. In the state, we have the governor's race, and we have a race for Senate that's going to possibly decide the balance of the Senate in Washington. I will say to Fernando, gerrymandering happens on both sides. It's whoever's in power is the one who are gerrymandering. They all do it. It's wrong, and it needs to be fixed. But both sides do it. You know, if you're a Republican in power, you're going to gerrymander districts to help the Republicans. If you're a Democrat in power, you're going to gerrymander districts for the Democrats to be in power. I mean, look at the city of Philadelphia, which is also going through a redistricting process. It's not even gerrymandering because they're all Democrats, but it's gerrymandering to say, okay, what wards do I want to be in my district? So Democrat. I mean, if you look at the city of Philadelphia 20 years ago, if you looked at how gerrymandered the city council districts were, it's just proof that they all do it, and they all do it, and it's all wrong. But and it is an important issue, but I'm looking at these big races in the state of Pennsylvania, and I think they're both going to be close. The governor race is going to be close. The Senate race is going to be close, and it will have huge effects on many things. The governor right now, if he doesn't like the legislation, he has the ability to veto. So if the governor is a Republican, then you're going to see a lot of Republican issues in the state of Pennsylvania. And then when you go to the Senate, I mean, it's 50-50 right now with the tiebreaker in Vice President Harris. That could change if this seat in Pennsylvania is flipped. So,
well, again, as the leader of your Republican Party said, there are good people on both sides. I don't think there are good people on the gerrymandering side. The Republicans have really been abusing the system, and they are at this point threatening our civil rights, our right to vote, and it's happening all over the country. Fernando.
Well, yeah, it's happening all over the country. I am, as always, very honored to share with you know that I'm working with Attorney General Eric Holder and his group at the national level, and me specifically in Pennsylvania. And right now, one of our affiliates, for example, already sued the gerrymander maps in Texas. I know that another affiliate is very close to start doing the same thing in North Carolina and Ohio, because the reality is that in those states where Republicans, at least specifically talking about those states, they have gerrymandered maps. Now, in Pennsylvania, both chambers, as we know, are controlled by Republicans. The congressional maps here have to be drawn by legislation, but at the end, it goes to the governor for veto or for signature. We don't know yet what's going to happen. However, one clear indication is just what happened last week, right? The Republican-controlled Government Affairs Committee in the House chose an initial map. They call it that it was drawn by a citizen as part of the public input process. However, the citizen is a former Republican elected official that describes herself as a conservative Republican. But the most interesting piece is that the map is so bad that not even Republicans agree with it. Right? On Thursday, last Thursday, there was a hearing where the map drawer was invited, and the hardest questioning that she got was by Republican members, because in addition to the partisan leaning to the right, she divided counties that had never been divided before, and state representatives, Republicans from those counties, were very aggressive questioning her on why and how she got there. And she literally told, well, I didn't have more time. The map is bad, but this is the only thing that I could do, so I have to submit this map, and that's the map that was chosen. So I don't want to put all of the fault on her, of course, because at the end she was being part of a public process, but the fact that Republicans chose that map, when even the drawer is recognizing that it's a bad map, that she didn't have enough time, it's a clear indication, at least, that for now, some Republicans in Harrisburg are trying to push to do the same thing as they did in North Carolina, in Texas, in Ohio.
So what's going to happen with that defective map?
So that map is going to be negotiated as part of any other legislation. There's going to be amendments to the process. And let's say, just for the sake of argument, that the map, whatever the final version is, once it passes both in the House and in the Senate in Harrisburg, the bill is sent to Governor Wolf, and Governor Wolf will decide if he wants to sign or veto. The interesting piece is that, knowing how Republicans operate, or at least how they did 10 years ago, the governor created an advisory council on redistricting, and this advisory council, before looking at the map, like weeks ago, they issue a set of principles to tell the governor, if the map and the process meets this principle, then you should sign the map. If not, obviously, you shouldn't. You should be against it. And of course, all of the principles were not met. So we cannot guarantee that the governor will veto the map, because there's no law yet. We need to wait for the final version. But as far as we know, an analysis indicates the map that is out there, that Republicans are proposing as the starting point, it doesn't meet any of the governor's principles.
Well, in the note you sent me previously, you say, how did we get here, where we are? And the note says in 2010, Republicans rode a midterm wave into power, winning state legislative and gubernatorial elections around the country. And so we know how we got to this point. So as long as they are in control, as in Pennsylvania, the legislature, they can do stuff like that. And that's quite, look, the sort of tragic thing is Philadelphia has been in the hands of Democrats for more than six decades, right? And I always complain about that. That's one of my pet peeves. Where is the Republican Party? What is the position? And then I'm placed into the odd situation of complaining about Democrats here and complaining about Republicans in the state. But the truth is that that's what's happening. The Democrats here is a big problem for the city. The domination of Democratic politics here, with the help of the unions, you know that. And well, you have been struggling to sort of reinforce the Republican Party, or revive it.
It's hard to change people's mindset. I mean, for 50 years, the Democrats have run the city. In my opinion, it's not being run well. And if you look at the murder rate in the city of Philadelphia and the crime and the fact that our mayor, former prep guy, Jim Kenney, and our DA, they're not addressing the issues that are hurting us most, whether it's poverty or crime. You know, they're sitting on their hands and not doing anything. But here's the challenge: when District Attorney Larry Krasner, he was elected in a fair election, even in the primary, they came out and they voted for him, 2-1. You hear a lot of people complaining, but then they come out and when it was an election, a lot of people didn't vote. And that's the problem. They didn't come out and vote. I heard a lot of complaints. But and we'll speak in the primary first. They didn't come out. And so, he was elected, he moved on. And, it's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again. You're going to get, expect to get a different result. I was a Democrat. We talked about it before the show. When people ask me, why did I become Republican? Why did I leave the Democratic Party? I didn't leave the party left me. It's not the same party it was when I registered to vote in 1994. So, things do need to change. And I ask people, and I would like people to give Republicans a chance. A balance of power is a good thing. And when you only have 2 Republicans on city council, you're not going to get that balance of power, and you're not going to get that diverse thought that are going to bring new ideas to the table, that are going to bring jobs to the city, that are going to look at the crime and not just say, well, it's guns. That's all I hear about is guns. And I'm not a huge fan of guns. I'm a 2A guy. I don't personally own guns, but that's all I hear coming out of city council. It's guns. And by the way, it's Harrisburg's fault. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're not prosecuting lower level crimes, that we're not prosecuting drug dealers, and we're not doing things like that. It's guns, and that's what the DA and the mayor have said. And to me, they're passing the buck, and it's just not accurate. Our guns. Do we maybe need some stricter gun laws in the state of Pennsylvania? I say, with straw purchases, I would say absolutely. If you were involved in a straw purchase, there have to be hefty fines and jail sentences. But to sit there and say it's because we have too many guns.
So that's a topic for another day. I would love to come back and just talk about gun control and why it hasn't happened. And so many times I saw Obama crying because little kids were killed, and nothing's done. You see that image of the president in tears, and you see the tragic, the families going through the whole suffering, and nothing happens, even though there's like that immediate hope that maybe now something will happen. Then nothing.
Just a few days ago, it was, if I'm not mistaken, the 19th anniversary of Sandy Hook, right? Where 8, 9, I don't remember the specific number of literally 5 and 6 year olds
20
were killed.
20 kids. So anyway, so we're going to take a brief pause here in Úrsula Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez desde la Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, en compañía de Drew Murray y mi tocayo Fernando Treviño. Danny Ramos controla la máquina digital. Regresamos en un minuto.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay. Just go to the site.
Toma menos de un minuto saber si está usted en riesgo de padecer prediabetes. Puede averiguarlo aquí. Visite esta página.
Once there was a boy who did the same thing again and again. One day, he was told he had autism. He got help and slowly learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Mendez, en compañía de Drew Murray y mi tocayo Fernando Treviño, hablando de varios temas aquí en La Mesa Redonda. Gun control, I want to say it again. We should talk about that because it's a very important issue. The most urgent issue at this very minute right now, as I look at Biden and what he needs to do, and there's a tremendous obstacle that he needs to address, and it's the filibuster. And what's happening with that?
We absolutely need to keep the filibuster. There's a reason for it. It is so that both sides of the aisle have to negotiate. If you didn't have a filibuster, basically every 4 years or 8 years, whenever there is a turnover in Congress, pendulum's going to swing back and forth. We'll be far left, and then when Democrats in power, and then we're going to go far right. We're not going to solve our issues. The filibuster is there for a reason. And you know what is interesting to me is the filibuster was never a problem. It's when all of a sudden it wasn't a problem when the Republicans held a few more seats in the Senate. Then it was a good thing for Democrats. Now that the Democrats, it's a tie, but have the tiebreaker in the vice president. Now it's a problem. It's the same thing to me when you talk about the popular vote and the presidency. It wasn't a problem until Hillary Clinton lost, or I would say even Al Gore lost. Then all of a sudden we have to go to the popular vote. It's only a problem when it affects the Democrats, Mr. Mendez.
The big difference, Tocayo and Drew, is that the Democrats never abused it the way that Republicans did. And I agree with you. Ideally, it's a useful, legislative tool or parliamentarian tool. It has to be there in order to force negotiation, and that's fine. But that was 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We can see now the way that Republicans have abused it, the way that they have, blocked every single bill since Obama and now. And obviously, when Trump was there, it wasn't an issue because obviously they wanted to support their own party. But I think that the biggest difference, Drew, is the way that it has been abused lately. So right now, the most important issue that we're facing, obviously, is still recovery. It's still the economy. And we have the building back better, or whatever this legislation is, that it's absolutely essential that it passes because it's going to bring the investment that we need to create jobs, that we need to help the small businesses, including many Latino businesses that are very, very hurt in the city and across the country. And it hasn't passed yet because the threat of the filibuster. So if Republicans would be willing to sit down and negotiate and get stuff done, then let's keep it. But we know that that's not the case. So even if it's, repealing it for good or making exceptions or changing the rules, something has to happen in order to get stuff done that the American people need. Again, we're talking about economic recovery. We're talking about more investment on COVID. We are seeing what is happening with the latest variant of COVID. And the issue is that Republicans are still using the filibuster to block everything that this country needs.
Well, they didn't block the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill passed. And that, there were two parts of this bill. There was the infrastructure bill and the social infrastructure bill is what I'll call it. Republicans passed the infrastructure bill. So in my mind, there was already some compromise there. And we do need to invest in our bridges and our roads and our infrastructure. But there are things in the Build Back Better social infrastructure bill that are they're too far, they're too far left.
How many Republicans voted in favor of the bill?
Of the infrastructure bill? Enough that it passed.
Yeah, but how many?
And the compromise.
How many? That's
The exact number, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But, what it had to have been
10.
10, yeah, it had to be 10.
And
Was it exactly 10?
I think it was 10. And there are about 6 Republicans that are normally willing to support democratic things. I have one question for you. If Mitch McConnell was in charge of the whole thing right now, and he saw the filibuster as an obstacle, would he hesitate to do away with it?
Would he hesitate? Everybody wants more power.
No, answer the question.
I would think, would he try to get rid of it? He didn't before. He didn't before.
Yeah,
So
because there was no peril before. Now,
and look, it's the problem on both sides. They don't want to talk to each other. And in my opinion, we have too many people who are far right and too many people who are far left.
Yeah, but
Not enough people.
but the abuses are different, right? Again, we saw. I don't want to keep going back to that, but the abuses are different. We saw what happened with now Attorney General Garland when he was Obama's candidate for the Supreme Court, right? Republicans, blocked that nomination for more than a year because there was supposed to be an election and everything that we already know. And as soon as Trump was on the same place, they didn't have any problem of absolutely doing exactly the opposite that they did in order to get what they wanted. So yes, it's politics. Yes, it's very partisan right now. It's very extreme. But the way that Republicans have abused that power, it's different than the way that Democrats have abused it. I'm not saying that they haven't. I'm saying that it's just.
Well, let's look at this at a state level. So you're saying we're talking federal level now, but look at all the vetoes that Governor Wolf does in the state of Pennsylvania. He vetoes everything that comes out of the public legislature that is not veto-proof. So there's no compromise there either, Fernando. Governor Wolf acts. He's King Wolf. I always give this as an example during the pandemic when he shut down real estate sales. People were stuck without a home because they sold a home, they can't buy a new home. The Republican legislature one day said, no, we need to bring that back. He vetoed it. The next day, he brought it back. That's what he did. It doesn't make sense. And so, and I know we're talking federal level, but I want to give examples of the Democrats do it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Now, again, the abuse is different, right? Because 90% of the bills that are trying to pass the legislature right now, it's anti-abortion, there's a piece of legislation that the latest legislation that Governor Wolf vetoed, and I know that you want to have another show about this. An open carry bill. Like after everything that we are seeing right now, we have more than 525 homicides in Philadelphia. That's not the only reason. So the Republicans, in response, they are trying to say now everyone can actually have a gun. So yeah, the governor is going to veto some of the other stuff. But to give you a quick example, and apologies, friends, if I come back to redistricting, last Monday, there was a hearing on the congressional map that we were discussing before. The Government Affairs Committee literally needed to vote on keep moving the piece of legislation because the map was so bad. They actually moved legislation without a map. Like they are trying to pass, a congressional map without a map. And the only argument that Democrats, well, there were two specific arguments, but the main argument that Democrats brought to the table was exactly your point. Like, gentlemen, we know that we have a Democratic governor. We know that we need to sit and negotiate with him because if we pass everything the same way that we do it without negotiating, he's going to veto. So why are we trying to rush this bill with no map, literally without a map, right? Without negotiating with the governor? And the answer was, yeah, no, we don't care. We're going to move forward. And they voted out of committee the new Pennsylvania Redistricting Act of 2021 that is supposed to have the new congressional map without a map.
There you are. Well, but you sort of did not answer my question. Would Mitch McConnell?
Yes, I did. I said no. He didn't do it.
Of course he would.
He didn't do it before when they were in power. So why would he do it now?
Again,
but my question is, if he was in charge right now at this point and he saw that his agenda was blocked, he would not hesitate for 1 minute to abolish it.
Not even a second, Lucayo. Not even again, Mitch McConnell, his first statement after Obama wins, our agenda is to stop him and to stop getting reelected, right? Now, Mitch McConnell is the one who led the blocking of Attorney General Garland when he was a candidate, a nominee to the Supreme Court. And he literally took the opposite of, he is not afraid of abusing every single thing on his favor in order to get his agenda, in order to get what he wants now. It's politics, right? Everyone in power sometimes does the same thing. My point is, where's the limit? The kind of abuses that McConnell has done in the Senate are just unprecedented.
But no, I don't think he would do the filibuster. So to answer your question, no, because he knows that if he did, there's going to be a time when Democrats are in power, and then there's going to be, then they have, the opposite side has no power. They might as well.
Also, there's some sort of sentimental attachment to that whole idea of filibuster being a tool that is sort of, it's out there, it's sort of sacred, don't touch it because
it's the way that we have always done it.
Right. And yet, okay, this Congressman, Eric Selwell from California, he was part of the impeachment process and all that. He's a very outspoken congressman. He said in an interview yesterday, he said, we don't want to wake up 20 years from now in a country that will look like Hungary or Turkey because we didn't want to break the filibuster. He said, and that's what's happening. The country is in jeopardy right now of having the voting rights curtailed, of having legislatures in every state go to the Republican side and change the laws, impede the vote of the minorities, and so on. So, do you agree with that?
Do I agree that that's where we could be? No, because there's a reason you need to filibuster so you don't go back and forth. And you keep talking about voting rights. So let's talk about it. In what way are Republicans trying to impede the vote? Is it voter ID? I mean, I believe in voter ID. I know you do. Yeah, it's voter ID.
But don't be disingenuous. That is not the problem we have right now with votes.
Well, let's look at Act 77 in Pennsylvania. We talk about a piece of legislation that actually had to be compromised, and it passed. And I was absolutely in favor of Act 77.
And that it was introduced by a Republican, and that every single Republican voted for it. But now when they lost, it's like, oh my God, this is bad. So
what did we do?
No. And look, again, when it was voted in, I was in favor of it. Because opening up the ability for more people to vote, for access to vote, it's a good thing. The problem is with Act 77, what happened was a pandemic. We weren't ready for it. When I say we, like no one, Democrats, Republicans, we weren't ready for that many mail-in votes. We absolutely were not. And we're a state that had already passed it. There were states like New Jersey who didn't have mail-in voting, who had to basically bring a process together within months because of the pandemic in order for people to vote. And whether or not you believe there was cheating in the election or not, I don't think the election was stolen. I think President Trump lost. But there is cheating in elections, and if you don't have confidence in your elections, then that's a problem whether or not you believe there's cheating or not.
I'm glad you bring that up because you know what they
need confidence.
Found out
What's that?
In Florida, Republicans voted at this what is that, the old people's area, what is it, like a garden area where Republicans are a great majority, and the people who voted who are probably in jail right now were Republicans. They voted twice.
So
they voted twice.
I agree with you, right? We weren't ready for the pandemic. The number of mail-in ballots surpassed the capacity. But at the end, it took 5 days. It wasn't like it took us like 20, 40, 50. Again, we were talking about Al Gore and George Bush, right? That took weeks. It was 5 days. But Tocayo, the main thing is that you don't go back in a really good system that allows more people to vote just because you weren't ready for the pandemic. You just fix the issue, right? Now you get ready. So the Republicans, instead of saying, okay, Act 77, it was good for everyone, we support it, right? But we had the issue of the pandemic, so let's fix that. And now they want to go back and cancel everything and make it difficult for people to vote because they lost.
We're going to take another brief pause en USA Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez. Nos acompaña Drew Murray, mi tocayo Fernando Treviño, Danny controla la máquina digital. Regresamos en un minuto.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Amigos oyentes de USA la radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Mendez, en compañía de Drew Murray y mi tocayo Fernando Truviño, hablando sobre un montón de temas, redistricting, inmigración, eso es el otro tema, immigration. Okay, so I have a list of items. You tell me if the Republicans are on the right side or the wrong side of this issue. Immigration.
What is the question, though? I mean, if you look at the sanctuary city,
Do we need reform?
Yes, we need reform. Absolutely. Yeah, I think on a national level, we need reform. We need too bad people coming into this nation, but I think we do need the path to citizenship to be easier.
Are you in favor of the people who are right now at the border in Mexico being allowed to come in?
Being allowed to come in? I mean, look, I'm not down there, Mr. Mendez. I don't know how much is happening, but no, I don't think we should just we should not open our borders and let anybody in. People need to be vetted when they come in.
You want more Norwegians?
I would take more everybody.
That's what Mr. Trump wanted, more Norwegians.
He liked the Norwegians. Look, the city of Philadelphia, for example, is a city of 1.5 million. We used to be 2 million. We have the infrastructure for 2 million people. I would welcome in 500,000 immigrants to come to our city. It's going to create more demand for jobs. It's going to create more tax revenue. We can lower taxes, but increase our revenue. So, I'm opposed to sanctuary cities because I think when someone is arrested in the city of Philadelphia and that person it's determined that person is illegal, I think we should detain the person for ICE to come in and arrest the person for being here illegally. Do I think we need reform and we should welcome in more immigrants? Of course, immigrants make our country as great as it is, Mr. Mendez. I mean, if we didn't have immigrants, then you couldn't have come from South America and taught me English, believe it or not, and create great.
I do believe it.
Right, he taught me English and create great. He actually did never teach me Spanish, but no, immigrants are what make our nation great. And yes, we do need immigration reform. Do we need open borders? No, I don't believe in that.
Okay, are the Republicans on the right side of the voting rights issue?
The voting rights issue, look, I think what we saw in the pandemic, we talked about with Act 77, that mail-in voting does have issues. There was it widespread cheating? No, but I know committee people who did ballot harvest. They didn't even know that it was illegal what they were doing when they were going around and taking people's ballots and going to the mailbox. They thought they were doing something nice for the people in their district, and a lot of elderly people, but it was illegal. So, it's compromise. Again, Act 77 is not going away. It's here. We need reforms. We need to make it better. We need voter ID. There's a voter ID law now in the state of Pennsylvania that a lot of people Democrats don't like. It is literally, it's voter ID, but you get the voter ID for free. It doesn't cost you any money. If you don't have a driver's license, you can get it for free. If you don't have that ID, well, so that's what I'm talking about. So,
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, when I had this argument with Pedro and other people, I always said, just tell me one thing. How long do you need for everybody to have access to ID? Give me 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, the next cycle. Take all the time you want. Would you need money? We have money in the budget. Let's put money behind it. Let's do all the technology available for that. And the answer I get is that it still is unfair. Well, how is it unfair?
So the devil is always on the details, Ruben and Tocayo, right? Because, you need to have an ID in order to vote. That's the argument. How are you going to get that ID? What are going to be the requirements, right? Yeah, it's great that it's going to be for free, but are you going to pay for public transportation for some folks to actually go to get it? Are you going to have mobile stations to go and do it in there? So all of those details, when we're talking about voter ID, this bill and many other Republican bills, they don't include any of that. So my main concern would be, look, I come from Mexico. In Mexico, we have had official voting ID for many years. They do it for free. You get to go. However, there are still many people that cannot get it because they ask you for an ID in order to get it. So that's my point. If you don't have an ID to vote, you need to present an ID to get your voting ID card in order to vote. So If these bills would address that, then let's sit down and have a conversation. But when you're just saying no, you have to present, you're gonna have a voter an ID card in order to vote, but you don't address the requirements, you don't address the help that people needs to go to the location, even if the bill is free, if the ID is free. So let's talk about.
I have the perfect solution. To open my phone, face recognition. I think the whole country in the future, I don't know how long it's going to take, a decade, 20 years, everybody, you want to vote? Yeah. Now you can vote.
The only difference is that in order to have face recognition with your phone, you just buy the phone. There's no government regulation like that tells you, oh yeah, you are Fernando. So the only way that you can open your phone is if you have proven that you are Fernando. You don't. You just buy the phone and that's it. With voting ID, that's the pieces. How do you prove who you are in order to get the ID then to vote? But donate
blood, have a chip implanted, whatever.
We already have it.
It's doable.
With the COVID vaccine, we already have the chip going on.
All this is doable. It's just that liberals are opposed to this from any point of view. They don't want to hear about it. And
I'm a liberal and I'm hearing about it, and I'm telling you
for what reason?
I told you he was a Republican.
For what reason? I am a Republican on this issue. For what reason? Because it would be easy if we all went the same way. Yes, let's find the means to do it.
Now, Tocayo, and that's one of the mistakes that we always make, right? Voting access, it's all about voting ID. Right now, there are pieces of legislation, including in Georgia, and Republicans are trying to do the same thing in Pennsylvania, that if you are in the line to vote, people are not even allowed to give you a bottle of water so you can wait. Right. So those are that's the abuses that I'm talking. We can discuss, voting ID forever, right? And we can be in the same side of the argument or a different argument, but that's not the only thing, right?
No.
What is happening right now with Republicans is that they are cutting by half some of the precincts. They're cutting by half some of the voting locations, right? They are actually limiting the capacity of people to wait. People are waiting in line for hours because they really want to vote, but you cannot leave the line to go to the restroom because that's going to be forbidden. Someone cannot bring you a bottle of water so you can, stay there. That's the kind of abuses that we should be talking about.
Well, I think the biggest threat in this aspect is when they're talking about empowering people to change the outcome of the election, to sort of name their own slate to send to Washington. As these are the people, these are the electors. And somehow the legislature will have the power to cancel the vote of the people and say, that's not valid. This is what we're going to do. We're going to send these people. That's the threat that is out there right now. Is be realistic from what I have seen.
I don't think that.
You just described
and I would disagree with it.
You just described gerrymandering, and the clearest example of that is that in the last 20 years, when there have been legislative elections in Pennsylvania, every single election, the Democratic candidates receive the highest number of votes in general, right? You have 203, legislative seats in the House. The total of the vote, the Democrats win. However, Republicans have had the majority for how long? For the same amount of time.
Right.
And suddenly they have a majority in the House by 5, 10, 15, 20 seats, even when the majority of Pennsylvanians are voting the other way around. What you describe is exactly gerrymandering. They don't care about how people vote as long as they control the process, as long as they can manipulate or gerrymander their districts, they're going to stay in power.
Well, when you look at the last election, and I would say no, that the state of Pennsylvania elected Republicans because the majority of the people wanted Republicans in. Statewide offices. So when you look at the judges, 3 out of the 4 statewide elections were won by Republicans. And they were close. They were close. It wasn't, by no means was it, 2/3 of the vote went to Republicans. But, I think that was a mandate. When you looked at the judges, 3 out of the 4 state races were won by Republicans. And the 4th was so close that there was a recount. So I think that was a mandate. And I think it goes back to the pendulum started swinging too far left. So people want to, bring it back. I think most people want it in the middle. I mean, I think, I joke you're a Republican, Mr. Mendez. I don't think you're a Republican, but I think you're a moderate. And, and I think a lot of people are. I'm a moderate.
I straddle the middle. Yeah. I aim for looking for a fair appraisal of whatever the issue is. Your manifesto from in the RC.
Let's call it a statement. It was a press release.
What is NDRC?
And the manifest, it was kind of strong. NDRC is the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.
Okay, this is why it sounds like a manifesto. Accountability. We are putting politicians in notice. We are paying attention to how they handle redistricting, and we expect fair maps. Politicians who try to gerrymander the maps or prevent public input will be held accountable at the ballot box in 2022.
Yeah, that's our mission. Do you want public input or transparency? Because I think public input is so difficult, though. When you don't have experts, and I'm not saying politicians are experts at redistricting, but when you have, I agree with public input to an extent, but you need experts to do this. It is not easy to read all maps.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish there's a day that we just plug it into a computer, the census data, and then it just pops out maps.
Well, if that one, we already have those platforms, right? They already exist. And to give you an idea about the current map that was introduced by Republicans, the map drawer, the former Republican elected official that describes herself as a conservative Republican, she acknowledged that she didn't use a computer, that she literally grabbed a pencil and went through a spreadsheet and then started drawing the map.
Not on a napkin or anything like that.
No. So you're right. We need experts, and we have experts drawing the maps, but you need to make sure that there's public input, because the public is the only one available to bring those local nuances and advocate for communities of interest to make sure that they are taken into consideration, right? So this person is considered an expert on redistricting, and look at the map that she produced, right? There are many other groups working on actually training citizens from their perspective to draw maps and submit those maps. I'm not saying that those should be the maps, but then you bring everything together and start negotiating to get for maps, and that's not the case.
So we're going to take another break, and on the other side of the break, I'm going to ask you about your comprehensive approach that is in your manifesto, as I call it.
Of course.
Señores oyentes de USA la Radio, les habla Fernando Mendez aquí en la mesa redonda de Roundtable. Drew Murray y mi tocayo Fernando Treviño, Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento con más problemas con el voto.
You ever had this food before, or it's like the first time you were here?
Yes, a couple times.
Yep.
Yes.
So what do you order right now? Which one?
We got the chicken tikka masala.
Yeah, I got the
and the butter masala.
Oh, so the Indian and Pakistani food is a little bit spicy.
Yeah.
So you tolerate the spice or everything?
I like spice, but we got the mild.
Oh, okay. So it's
but I do spice.
Oh, and you?
Yeah, I mean, I can somewhat handle spice. Not too much, so that's why I got the mild.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Había un niño que era muy sensible a luces y sonidos. Construía escondites donde no podían entrar. No le gustaba mirar a la gente a los ojos. Lo hacía sentir incómodo. Un día se descubrió que tenía autismo. Con ayuda, poco a poco, aprendió a vivir mejor con ello.
Mientras más pronto se diagnostique, mejor. Conoce las señales en autismspeaks.org.
Señores oyentes de USA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. From the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection.
Please.
Estoy aquí en compañía de Drew Murray y mi tocayo Fernando Treviño hablando sobre gerrymandering, sobre un manifiesto de parte de la compañía donde trabaja Fernando. it says here that you have leveled the playing field on redistricting in 3 major ways.
So we are trying to level the playing field. We are trying. One is promoting, obviously, fair maps and transparency in the process. But the reality is that these decisions are made by politicians. So NDRC has an umbrella of different affiliates. NDRC is what we call a 527 political action committee. So we are allowed to be political. We are allowed to endorse candidates. We're allowed even to give donations to candidates. And we do have even a citizens pledge where we ask citizens that if they identify and they care about gerrymandering and redistricting, they can pledge to vote for candidates who align with our views. So through our 527, we're able to not only do political advocacy and political lobbying, but also to support political candidates that favor fair maps, that favor transparency and public input and all of the elements that we're talking. The other aspect is that we have the National Redistricting Action Fund, that is a 501c4. Our public advocacy campaign lives there. It's called All on the Line. And this is your traditional 501c4 that does mobilization, voter education, citizen education. We want to make sure that we are empowering specifically communities of interest, African Americans, Latinos, AAPI, to be more vocal and more active in this process. At the same time, we recognize that you need a lot of research, that you need a lot of actually sometimes litigation, as we have decided. So we also have a 501c3 that is the National Redistricting Foundation. It's one of our affiliates that focuses its work most of the time on research and litigation. So we are trying to use, and this is something that our national president says all the time, we're going to use every tool at our disposal. Because if we don't fix gerrymandering, we're going to keep having the same issues that you're describing. We go way too far to the left, we go back too far to the right, there's no compromise, and there's political or partisan gerrymandering that it's not allowing us to do anything in Harrisburg or in Washington. So at this point, Tocayo, Drew, we are open, like we don't care. We are going to do we're going to use every single tool at our disposal. Research, litigation, lobbying, political influence, whatever we need to do in order to fix the problem.
Yeah, the 3 things that you listed were mobilization, litigation, and accountability. So what is the accountability part?
So accountability basically is, and we can circle back to talk about, Mayor Kenny and DA Krasner on other issues. Accountability is when you like a candidate, you support that candidate, the candidate claims that he aligns with your views, that candidate wins, and then that candidate goes off and does something else. We need to hold those elected officials accountable. So we're going to be building, electoral campaigns. We're going to be mobilizing people to hold those officials accountable if they don't support fair maps.
Well, no question that this is going to be a very important year to accomplish that, because we don't know what's going to happen in 2022.
We don't know yet. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Okay, so in the few minutes we have left, looking back through this whole period with COVID and up and down, one day we were okay, the next day back to masks and so on. How do you see this period of since 2020 to now, 2021? Anything that is a highlight for you? Anything that impressed you that you will remember?
From the past 2 years,
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously been defined by COVID, and I think every one of us wants to get beyond COVID.
No, in the context of COVID.
In the context of
it affected our economy, our politics, travel, everything.
Absolutely. That we needed to do everything that we could to stop this horrible disease. Unfortunately, it became political, and you can blame. I blame President Trump for a lot of that. I also blame Democrats. I think no one should have allowed this or permitted this to become political. Unfortunately, it did. I think that's where we are now. That's why there are people who refuse to get vaccinations, because it's become political. We need to get past this point where it is political and just say, what's best for us as a city, as a state, as a country. But I also think we need to pull back on some of these restrictions. The vaccine mandate that the city of Philadelphia just put on, I don't agree with it. There are a lot of people, a lot of businesses that are going to get hurt. If you're going to do a mandate, I will say this: do it federally. Because when you do it on a municipal level, it's just like a soda tax. People can just leave the city. And if I can't go to a restaurant in Philadelphia, then I'm going to cross City Line Avenue and I'm going to go to a restaurant there. So if you're going to have mandates, it should be done at a federal level. Definitely not at a municipal level. Maybe at a state level, but I would even say it's at a federal level. And we're such a divide in this country, and it is because of.
But I think we might be moving in that direction, and I think that's what we need to pass something federal.
I mean, I don't love the idea of mandates, but if we're going to do it, it's got to be done at the federal level.
Same question.
But let's be honest. What would happen right now if President Biden comes out with a federal mandate for vaccination? Right? Republicans are going to use it as, oh my God, political. It's going to be the same thing. So believe me, you don't need to believe me right now. Just look at my social media. I'm not a fan of Mayor Kennedy. That's not a secret. And this is me, Fernando, speaking personally, right? But when the federal government is not able to act, when the state government is not allowed to act, the mayor needs to take action. And even when it's not an ideal scenario, I agree with you. At the end, the mayor has a responsibility to protect Philadelphians. Sometimes he doesn't. This time, the responsibility is to get vaccinated. Now, every year we get vaccines for everything. We go to the doctor. Like, when you use the vaccine as a political tool, that's what you describe it, that's the issue. Just go get vaccinated and be able to say I'm vaccinated. That science is science, Tocayo, right? It's very easy. This is not a Democratic argument or a Republican argument. Get vaccinated. Science is science. Live your life the way that you should be living in Philadelphia, and don't focus on the political argument.
Yeah, unfortunately, Drew, Trump made it political. All you have to do is go back and listen to the interview he gave Bob Woodward, and what he was trying to hide, the fact that this virus was already here, that it was lethal, and he said, I can't say anything because that would create panic. He said, panic about his re-election, that's what will create panic for it. He was afraid of that. So I want to say that the positive thing of all this period is how quickly our scientists came up with vaccinations that are, for the most part, effective. And that's one huge step towards helping us.
Absolutely. But you have to give the Trump administration credit, because they're the ones that developed the plan, that put out the money, and got us to the point where we did have vaccination. I'm not saying President Trump and his administration created this vaccine, but it was developed under his administration, and no one gives him credit for that. And even the rollout of the vaccines, everyone's like, oh, President Biden did such a great job of the rollout of the vaccines. That thing was in place before the President Biden came into office, obviously because it was December when the vaccine rollout began.
Yeah, so the response in terms of the investment in the vaccine, it came under the administration of President Trump. Just look at the timing, right? There's no way to deny it.
Nobody would deny that.
But in terms of the response, in terms of the urgency, in terms of the public messaging, in terms of just dealing with the reality with the public, it's day and night.
The lasting image of his dealing with COVID was climbing the steps of the White House when he came back from having had COVID, and he removes the mask. Like, look at me, I'm Superman, because his doctor told him that he was. Anyway, I want to thank you, Drew, and Tocayo, for taking the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez.
This was a great program, and I hope we clarified some issues instead of confusing people. So, anyway, thank you. And gracias, amigos, por escucharnos en el día de hoy. Se despide Fernando Mendez, Drew Murray y Fernando Truiño estuvieron con nosotros el día de hoy. Dani Ramos en la máquina digital. Los esperamos hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.